Good morning, kids, and today we're checking out a brand new video from Popcross Studios of turning Poppy Playtime's Chapter 3 monsters into superheroes. Not Marvel, not DC, just pure superheroes. Let's hop in and check them out.
Even though I have used Poppy Playtime characters a few times on this channel, I've never done a full video around it. And with Chapter 3 having come out, I've gotten a lot more requests lately to go back and finally do a full video. And I decided to do something with them that I haven't done in a while, and that's turn the characters into superheroes, but not set in the Marvel Universe or DC Universe, just my own original superheroes. It's a series that I used to do a lot on this channel, but I kind of stopped doing it because they stopped doing anywhere near as well as the Marvel and DC related videos would usually do. But this year I kind of am just leaning more into doing something because I have a good idea for it or I like it, and less because I think it'll do well. So we got this today. I mean, you know, still subscribe if you're new here and you want to see more Poppy Playtime stuff out of me, because enthusiasm from the audience does make it more fun for me to work with the topic. But with all that said, we can finally get into the story and art.
Let's go!
Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like it, but either way, enjoy the show.
The world is a much
starting
simpler
off with
place when we
Kissy
can
Missy.
write people into black and white categories. Friend, foe, hero, villain. But when we look at things a little longer, it quickly becomes clear that nobody fits into just one category. This was something that Theodore Gramble would have to grapple with, as he started to see that a so-called hero he'd idolize may not be so exclusively heroic after all.
Oh?
Theodore nowadays is more well known to the world as the hero Catnap, but to know why he came to question his idol, we have to go back long before he ever got his abilities. There was a company called PowerPlay Co., started by a man named Elliot Ludwig, who was a brilliant inventor that saw how overrun the world was becoming with supervillains, and wanted to make a way to keep children safe from getting caught in the crossfire in hero and villain battles.
A good mission.
His idea was to start a toy company that made intelligent toys with built-in protections for children. They even acquired a contract to connect their toys wirelessly to a network run by the Superhero Corrections and Placement Foundation, which promptly reported supervillain attack
SCPs.
locations so the toys knew when to activate defensive measures, whether providing the child with a means of escape, or shifting into a bulletproof bodysuit to protect them, or what have you. The toys became incredibly popular with kids and parents alike, but eventually Ludwig wanted to take things a step further. He funded and in his limited spare time co-ran a foster home, and he thought that with the research his scientists had done into the origins of powers, he could bypass the toy phase altogether and just give kids superpowers. His hope was that if they could safely give powers to some of these orphans, they'd be compelled to grow up to use their abilities to protect other kids like themselves.
Well, you would hope.
Of course, Ludwig wasn't so irresponsible as to run the first experiments on kids. Or so the story goes. This is where the details get a little murky, as this part of the tale could be partially untrue, but the rumor is that Ludwig used himself as the prototype trial, trying to give himself abilities, and they went both right and wrong. He was given abilities, but ones he couldn't control, to absorb the strengths and energy of the people around him. He was locked away in the lower walls of the PowerPlay Co., allegedly only until he could gain control. But he'd be kept there far, far longer than he'd originally have expected.
How long?
One of his lead scientists, Dr. Harley Sawyer, took over as the head of the project in the meantime, and well, he wasn't so patient as Ludwig. He moved them right along onto experimenting on the orphans, even transferring all the kids into an on-site housing to make things easier. Some experiments outright failed, leaving some of the kids physically or mentally damaged, exactly the kind of reckless mistake Ludwig had wanted to avoid. But eventually they did have successes, two of the first being heroes they gave the somewhat childish names Miss Kiss and Mr. Hugs. As these two grew into their late teen years, they were trained by a team of on-site teachers, who were all actually clones of an ex-assassin hired by the company. PowerPlay also made a very calculated marketing strategy to introduce Miss Kiss and Mr. Hugs to the world, intending, yes, for these kids to work as heroes to protect people, but also to make them marketing ploys to sell toys for PowerPlay. They'd even tell the world that these two were a couple, despite that not actually being true, just to make the two seem more wholesome to the public. Some people were off-put at first by the unnatural...
I'm sorry, it's just the whole, hey, these two characters are standing next to each other. I smell shit!
height and
I'm sorry, but that would be like a damn good shot. I smell shit.
unchangeably furry skin of these two heroes. But beyond that, their launch to the world was quite successful and did significantly increase profits for the company. But all the while, Kiss and Hugs were uncomfortable with the roles they were being forced to play, and somewhere in the bowels of the site, the prototype hero was stewing in his hatred of what the Doctor was turning the company into.
That can't be good. But hey, not bad. And the first hero is actually pretty damn good. It makes me want to go back and watch the others. Who's next?
Now, a reminder, it is still uncertain whether Ludwig himself was the prototype experiment, but for the purposes of this tale, we'll continue to assume this is the case. And something we do know for certain is that Theodore Gramble, one of the orphans who came to live on site at Powerplay, would sneak down and visit the proto-hero, standing outside his door and chatting with him for as long as he could before someone would come and usher him away. Theo had wanted to be a part of the Better Bodies experiments, giving kids powers, because he had
I like that. Better bodies instead of the bigger bodies.
always wanted superpowers, but Proto told him it wasn't safe, that the doctors here were not taking proper precautions and considering the safety of the children. He also told him about how the children who'd gained powers were just being used as marketing ploys for the company and not being made into proper heroes whose main intent was to help people. The company had even put a chip in the brain of every hero given abilities that could allow Powerplay to take control of their motor functions in case they deemed the hero was about to publicly do anything that would tarnish their brand. Proto claimed he could give Theodore powers safely and let him be free to become a proper hero if the boy helped him escape. Proto claimed he had his powers under control now, and the Doctor was just keeping him locked up so that he could continue running the company his way. Theo deeply respected Proto, and so he did as the man asked. He managed to swipe keys and lock codes from the guards and got Proto out of his cell. They attempted to flee by going farther down to a floor of the facility that had been used at one time to test newly developed powers, but that had resulted in the whole floor being practically destroyed. There had been plans to fix it up, but the company had never gotten around to it. Proto planned to have them climb up through there out of an elevator shaft, but as they moved through the space, a set of loose, frayed wires fell from the ceiling and struck Theo right in the chest, electrocuting him. Proto had a choice then and there, to continue the escape knowing Theo would likely die before Proto could carry him out, or return to the labs, accept being recaptured again, but let the site doctors save the boy. He chose the latter and was soon back in his cell, waiting anxiously to hear about Theo's recovery. To save the boy, they ended up putting him right into a set of experiments they'd been running to create a team of heroes called the Smiling Crew. They were a set of 7, or now 8 heroes with Theo, with similar enhanced strength, speed, and agility to Miss Kiss and Mr. Hugs, but with the added ability to breathe gases from their mouths to cause different effects on those who inhaled them. Theo was turned into the hero called Catnap, whose red mist could cause any who breathed it to fall into a deep sleep. Unfortunately, it also had some other effects as well. Many criminals he'd apprehend with his ability would quickly prove to have horrific, violent nightmares once taken into police custody, and they'd thrash and scream so much that, if not strapped down, they could end up seriously hurting themselves. As a result, Theo was forbidden to use that ability in the field, and anytime he tried, they'd take control over his mind to stop him. Eventually, they'd even majorly limit his time sent out on missions. He hadn't been thrilled about joining a team under Powerplay's control anyway, and would lash out at those in charge whenever he could. Because of this, he too would often just be kept in a cell on the same floor as Proto, and as he stewed in captivity, his hatred would grow, and he'd continue to think about how this whole place had to be destroyed, and all the kids, empowered and not, needed to be set free. Luckily, or perhaps unfortunately, Proto was working on a new plan for escape.
Now, the reason why I'm guessing he's not rolling anything for Proto is because, well, all we've seen of him is just a singular arm. Hey, Mr. Light! Okay, I can't wait to see that. And we're back. Let's go.
Proto managed to relay to Theo that once his plan was in motion, there was a very important part that Theo would have to play. He'd need to make sure that all the hero trainers were out of the way. As mentioned previously, a former assassin had been hired to train the heroes in physical combat. Despite her not technically having any powers, Misty Delilah was able to thump all of them in a fight,
like Black
as
Widow.
could the clones of her that had been made by Power Play. She had technically agreed to be cloned so that her sisters, as the company would call them, could help further with training the kids, but she didn't realize they'd make so many clones of her. That, paired with her general dislike of children and the ridiculous hero attire they made her wear to appeal to the kids more, made Misty grow very disenchanted with working for Power Play. But she was being paid very well and so remained on, often taking out her frustrations over her job on the heroes she trained. If she and her clones were active on site during the hour of Proto's ploy, then they may be easily able to stop it. Theo knew exactly what he had to do. The training room that they now used had reinforced walls and doors so that none of the heroes could damage it with their powers. If he could trap Misty and all her clones in there...
I think I know what he's gonna do.
They wouldn't be escaping until someone
Because if you remember in the actual game, we find out that Miss Light ate her sisters.
Chose to let them out. Of course, it took them a few years to get this whole plan worked out. Theo had to slowly steal and sneak pieces of tech into Proto's cell when he wasn't forced to be inside his own, so that Proto could build a makeshift computer that could tap into all the same networks as the Power Play executives. By the time the whole plan was ready to go, Theo was 19 years old and had a well-established hatred for everyone who worked at Power Play. Even those who were nice to him and the other kids and heroes he still saw as spineless lackeys who far too easily tolerated how he and the other heroes were treated. So, when the day finally came, he was far too eager for the whole ploy to commence. He did as instructed and lured Misty and her clones into the training room by stealing her favorite weapon, a mace that she called Barb. The executives could have shut down his motor functions, but it didn't seem like a big deal in the moment. Though when Theo jumped back out of the training room, closing the door, he tapped on the communication system next to it and said, "Now, Proto." Suddenly, the door was locked. Before the doctor and the other employees knew what was happening, Proto had taken control of the whole site and locked all of the exits as well. Theo then went right after Dr. Harley Sawyer and dug his claws directly into the man's chest, stating that he'd never experiment on or control anyone again. Theo then destroyed the main computer bay so that nobody could stop Proto's hack, then ran to find his fellow smiling crew. He told them all what was happening and that it was finally time to kill their captors and escape. But some of them were not on board. The one who'd been presented to the world as the leader of the team, a hero called Dog Day, said he didn't like everything the company had made him do, but he did still think they were doing more good for the world than bad. Worse for Theo still, when Dog Day saw that some other heroes from the site had started onto a rampage like Catnap had wanted, Dog Day started fighting to stop them. And so Theo got on the comms to Proto again and said, "Plan B." Proto tapped into the same functions Power Play had used to control the heroes and used it to set all of them, willing and not, on a rampage of the facility. Over the next hour, every employee on site was slaughtered, and as it had started, Catnap had thought, good riddance to all of them. Though as it carried on, a voice in the back of his head had slowly gotten louder and louder, telling him that this was all wrong. By the time it ended, the only people alive on site were the other heroes, Proto, and Misty and her clones. Unfortunately, the clones had all ended up being trapped in there for days, and they began to go mad, with many of them wanting to kill the original Misty so they could take her place in the world. They all ended up brawling in there, with the fight only stopping when the original Misty managed to kill every single one of her clones. When she finally escaped that room, she just fled, furious by what had happened, but also somewhat glad that she'd been given an opportunity to kill all of the copies the company had made of her.
You know what, I can understand wanting to kill the copies because, well, of that, the copies and they want to take your place. But what did you do afterwards?
Despite the extreme havoc wrought on that day, the incident was not made wide public knowledge. The Superhero Corrections and Placement Foundation, deeply embarrassed by what had happened at a company they'd worked with, fed a story to the media about there being a tragic fire on site during a systems malfunction that trapped everyone inside, with the only ones who lived being those with powers. The Power Play heroes had various reactions to the whole ordeal. Some simply went into hiding, continuing to work as vigilantes while avoiding being brought in for questioning by the Foundation. Some had been killed in the whole ordeal, and some, like Dog Day, tried to get the real story out there in the hopes that someone would hunt down the now escaped Proto and bring him to justice. Of course, the original Power Play experiment couldn't let that happen. Catnap still worked alongside Proto and some of the other heroes who were grateful to him for their freedom to bring in any heroes who were trying to speak out. Proto even kept his computer to take control over the heroes to make it easier to bring them in.
Damn.
Which Catnap tried to ignore how hypocritical that was. His whole intent behind helping Proto free them was not just for revenge on Power Play, but so that none of the heroes would ever be forcibly controlled again. Worse still, a girl who'd been experimented on named Poppy had never had a control chip put in her brain, and she too was eager to out Proto's actions. So to try and encourage more of the Power Play heroes to go after her, Proto found a way to implant false memories into some of the heroes. He did this to heroes such as Marie Payne and Mr. Hugs, and even tried it on Miss Kiss, though it had failed due to her having a pre-existing friendship with Poppy that Proto's mind alterations couldn't get past. But to the others, the memories he implanted were of Poppy being a mad scientist named Stella Graber, who'd kidnapped and experimented on them, and now that they were free, they had to go and hunt her down and defeat her. All this was chipping away at Theo's trust in Proto, but he tried to ignore it all by reminding himself that Proto had let himself get recaptured once just to save Theo's life, and that Proto knew what was truly best.
Oh, hey.
But the thing that would finally break his faith in his hero was what Proto tried to have him do to Dog Day. Dog Day had been the most persistent in trying to get the world to know what Proto had done, and they'd ended up chaining him up in a warehouse they were working out of just to try and keep him quiet. Even still, he escaped multiple times, and eventually, Proto was so fed up that he...
I wonder what his gas does to people.
Told Theo to break the hero's legs to keep him from making any more attempts. This was finally too far. Theo tried to talk Proto out of it, but soon saw Proto reaching for his computer to activate his motor control over Catnap. In that moment, images flashed through Catnap's mind of Dog Day dangling in his cell with his legs just outright gone. Theo even saw a flash of Proto killing him eventually if he didn't do as Proto said. It was like he was seeing a whole potential timeline of where this could all go, and he couldn't allow it to happen. Before Proto could take control of him, Catnap grabbed his computer and smashed it. He freed Dog Day, and the two of them went on the run from Proto.
Yeah.
Theo felt deeply guilty for betraying the man who'd saved him, but it also felt like that was the first truly heroic thing he'd done in a very long time. Catnap didn't know if Proto would be able to find another way to take control of the heroes again, but at least for the time being they were safe, and could come up with a plan to make sure all the kids who'd been experimented on were well and truly free, both from Power Play and Proto.
Nice. But I'm still curious. What'd that gas do? But of course, that's the end of it.
I don't actively have a sequel plan to this, but I'm definitely open to it if people want that. So let me know what other monsters you'd want me to work with from Poppy Playtime. And if you're new here, you might want to check out something like my Minecraft mobs as superheroes and villains, or maybe my Pokemon superheroes and villains series, which I am actively considering going back to now, because that story does deserve a continuation. But besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note. And the thought I want to leave people with today is a quote I read this week from Steve Harvey, who said, "If you don't separate yourself from your distractions will separate you from your goals."
Oh.
This guy's a real all-rounder. He's a good comedian, TV show host, motivational speaker. Gotta use his quotes more often. I hope that's inspiring. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next video on Monday. Kicking off an Artist Reboots Grand Prix.
Oh, cool. Well, everyone, that's going to be the end of today's video. I hope you all enjoyed this. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe for more. Link to the original will be in the description below, and I'll see all you folks next time when we flick on. Peace out.